at my grown age, guys, I was sleeping in a single bed. My friends knew when I got here, I was always like, dating in the UK is non-existent, it's a myth, just this phase where you just have to go through a depressive episode. And I think it's just the realization that actually I didn't think I was signing up for this. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bomikazi Lupindo. I am a clinical psychologist and a doctorate student at the University of Oxford. And for those who are returning to the channel, welcome. It's always great to have you. So today I thought I could share a little bit about my experience in the UK, things I wish I knew, things that I have learned over the past year and a half, and hopefully you'll find them helpful if you are considering relocating to the UK. So I'll speak to both school, work, and I guess just life and living in the UK in general. And maybe I can start with the latter. So moved to the UK in September 2022, and now it's been a year and a half, a little bit more than a year and a half. And general things that I wish I knew before moving to the UK. I think all of us speak about, or at least hear about, the weather, the food, and those are big things that we hear about. Yes, I wish I knew that cooking for yourself is way better than eating within college or any kind of British food, honestly, because it's a lot more tastier, it's a lot more wholesome, it's a lot more hearty. And I honestly think I just leaned on the fact that before I moved to the UK, I was already used to being cooked for and being catered for in that way. And it just felt easier to just transition into that, coming here and continue to have my meals being prepped for me and so forth. And I actually spent the whole year, the whole first year when I got here, having food from college, buying takeouts and so forth. But the minute I actually made the decision to start cooking for myself, that made a massive difference in terms of just how I felt, because I was eating a lot more food that felt homely, food that was just tasty, and was just holding in mind the kind of palate I have. So definitely cooking for yourself is one big thing. The weather, y'all, like I just wish someone told me that when they say cold, like freezing cold, literally not feeling your feet cold, frostbite cold, and that it's cold all the time. Like it's cold all the time. In the summer doesn't feel like our summer in South Africa. It doesn't feel like summer in other parts of the world that I've been to. Summer here is seeing the sun but still being cold outside. It's experiencing warm, good weather for a day or two. And I think last year, honestly, I think at most warm days, not even scorching hot days, warm days probably made up 3 weeks, and it was 3 weeks spread out over the 6 months that are supposed to be spring and summer. And yeah, that was a bit of a shock for me, and that was quite difficult for me. And also I didn't know that I'd actually have to spend so much money buying clothes that are suitable for the weather here, layering up, buying appropriate thermals. I'm still struggling with shoes. Like if anyone has tips on what shoes to get in the UK, because any shoes and socks I get haven't been doing the trick. And if you're someone that's going to have to commute and go to work, or have to be outside for a bit of time in the winter, honestly, you need to make sure that you're right. And also, in addition to that, I think just not wanting to do stuff because it's cold, having to get my mindset out of that you know what, if you're going to live and exist in this space, you're actually going to have to do stuff while it's cold, while it's dark and it's like 4 p.m. Those kind of things are actually things that keep you sane, and are also things that you need to adapt to. And those are some of the things that I didn't know of. So food, clothes, weather, being social despite the weather, and the state of darkness that you experience, especially during the winter, and it getting dark early and the sun coming out a lot more later. Another thing I wish I knew, especially like in social aspects of things, in the UK, I feel like I was really privileged because I came with a group of other South Africans, and that made a world of a difference. But relocating to the UK, honestly, you feel really lonely. I don't know, there's just something about this place that makes you feel quite lonely and isolated despite having a lot of people around you. And that's something that really does affect you and affect your mood, and it's something that is quite difficult. I always say to people, like, if you're going to relocate to the UK, honestly, please just make sure you're relocating with your partner, because there's a sense of closeness and a sense of not being alone that's very different when you travel with your partner and you relocate with your partner. That isn't the same as when you do relocate with your friends. So I think that makes a massive difference. And also, on a similar front, just people starting to find that less lonely feelings when they are within relationships. And my friends knew when I got here, I was always like, dating in the UK is non-existent, it's a myth. But in actual fact, like, now that I think about it, yes, the dating culture here is very different. Some parts I appreciate in the sense that, like, there's a lot more focus on consent and just being mindful of the other person and the kind of impact that you have on the other person. Whereas in South Africa, like, if I like you, I'll let you know that I like you. And sometimes it's just too much. Like, they do a lot. So I've really been appreciating that here. But also in the same breath, like, people are really difficult to meet and interact with. And I think a large part of that also has to do with just like the UK culture. And I guess British people and the way in which, you know, they carry themselves and the way in which they are in social spaces. I found it quite difficult to grapple with the idea that, hey, actually people aren't as friendly and as forthcoming as they are in South Africa. Like, South Africa, you're in a store and you're talking to someone that's assisting you at the cashier. Firstly, in the UK, you have very minimum experiences of that, in the sense that, like, a lot of the tel services here are literally just self-help. So there isn't quite a lot of human interaction that happens in that space. And even if you do encounter a cashier, a till point rather, that has an actual person that's assisting you, the interactions there are very minimal. You're lucky if they even ask you how you're doing or respond when you ask them how you're doing. It's just hi. Even if you get that high, you are lucky. So I think it just took a while for me to get used to that. And I feel like that just also makes it a lot more difficult when you are in a social space and you're trying to get to know people and you're trying to meet people and interact with people, because people aren't as proactive or as forthcoming as in South Africa, which just makes things a lot more difficult, both in terms of dating, but also in terms of honestly just meeting people and making friends. So that was something that I had to adjust to as well. I also find that, and I guess this is not just in the UK, it's something in other contexts as well. And I guess it's the stage of your life also, you know, just being a lot more older, and I guess also a lot more accomplished. Those kind of things just make it a lot more harder to actually meet people, because, you know, dating is very different. What you need from dating is very different than when you were in university or doing your undergrad. And also, if you in a university setting, a lot of the people are a lot more younger, and, you know, they're looking for different things. What else on the front of dating? Yeah, I just think it's a lot more harder to meet people who are your age, who are single, who are, I guess, at a level that you need and what you're looking for when you're trying to date older. So that's another thing that I wish I knew, both, I guess, about the UK in terms of, I guess, people not being as forthcoming, but also just the dating culture here. Oh, and people will talk to death, guys. Like, people will talk to death on like dating apps, and I'm just like, yeah. Also something that I'm just not into. Yeah, I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that a person who just has never been interested in dating apps would find myself on dating apps, and just also being frustrated about that. They're just not for me. But alas, what else do I wish I knew about the UK more generally? I think slowly moving into school, I wish I knew that transitioning from being someone that was independent, self-sufficient, had her own apartment, had her own car, and moving to the UK, firstly, rent is extremely expensive here. So most times you are likely to have to share, because half your salary while sharing will likely go to your rent. So half your salary will go to your rent. Rent here is expensive, especially like if you're living in London, Oxford, those two places. Accommodation is quite expensive, so you'll have to share if you don't want to use like half of your salary to pay for accommodation. And that was something that was quite difficult for me to even grapple with, because I'm so used to having my own space. I've never had to share, and even in varsity I've never had to share. So that was something that was quite difficult for me. Moving from having like my own space and my own apartment and moving into college accommodation, which is where I currently live, that was something that was also really hard for me. I realized that it was quite a significant adjustment, because I just wasn't used to constantly being exposed to people in the spaces that I'm in. Like if I walk out and try to go to the kitchen, there's someone there. I've always had like an ensuite bedroom, which was great, but having to go into the kitchen and you bumping into someone, living in a space that is so tiny. Honestly, I've been so grateful for the accommodation I had this year, because last year, like I literally was in one room, and the only other room that was there was the bathroom. And yeah, that was just really hard for me. There was no space to exist and just be without it being on your bed or on your work desk, on like a small little couch that I had. And that was just hard for me. Also sleeping in a single bed, like sleeping at my grown age, guys, I was sleeping in a single bed. I used to fall off that bed all the time, and that was something that really affected my mental health. I just found it quite difficult to be within that space. So even looking into where I was going to stay and what accommodation I got for this year, it felt quite important to have like a bigger space. So I'm just grateful that like the space I'm in now, I have my own bedroom, I have a lounge area and my own bathroom, and the only thing I share is the kitchen, because I'm still in college accommodation. I also have a double bed, guys. I have a double bed. I am not falling off. I am super happy. Also, when you live in private accommodation, it's a lot more expensive, because you have to pay like electricity and heating, guys, like it's an essential. I think that's one of the things that I am actually worried about going to private accommodation, that not only will I pay a lot for rent, but I'll also have to pay quite a lot for heating, because your girl freezes to death. So yeah, I've been appreciating living in college because of that. And I guess in addition to like the financial costs of living here, moving here and moving as a student and being on a student stipend, I found that it was just not enough. Like, God bless them. I'm grateful for my scholarship and my stipend, but it was just not enough. Like, it was not enough for like just literally being a student and not even doing anything extravagant. Like if you want to go out with your friends, eat dinner out, like go watch a movie, those basic kind of everyday things that you do as a student, I found myself using quite a lot of my South African savings. And yeah, that was a bit of a concern for me, because I mean, the rand to the pound, regardless of how much I had, like my savings would eventually run out if I didn't think about how else to actually supplement my salary. So that is also something that I wish I knew, that stipend is not going to be enough. If it is enough, you need to kind of rethink how you live. And I think especially if you're coming from being someone that was working and going back into university, so having to think about, you know, how you're going to make adjustments to make sure that you still live within the means of your stipend. So that was also something that's quite important for me to consider, which is also why, I mean, it's partly why, but also I was just struggling with just being a student, and just being in an environment that is just about students. So which is also why then I started practicing part-time again as a psychologist. And I specifically chose London because it was just difficult for me to be in Oxford. It's a student town. It's all about the students. Also experienced it as quite inaccessible to people who aren't Oxford students. And honestly, like the culture here was just, it's just not for me. So it's always nice to know that I can just step out of this bubble and go back into the real world, even if it's for a few days in a week, and exist within a different space that is not Oxford. So yeah, going back into work, deciding to go to work was also to make sure that I am building my savings here. I'm able to actually do the things that I love, like traveling, which is also something that I really appreciate, that, you know, traveling is a lot more accessible here than it ever was in South Africa. So being able to work also afforded me the opportunity to actually be able to travel a lot more, which I really appreciated. I also wish I knew that going into work, I think this is something that was really hard for me, because it's also something that a lot of my friends and a lot of my colleagues who are coming from South Africa and trying to be psychologists in the UK, are something that I had to caution them about. Guys, they will underpay you. They will underpay you if you are coming in as a foreign national to the UK. And I mean, this is specifically experience I've had in psychology. I would like to imagine that it probably also goes into other fields as well. But they will underpay you, and their excuse would be, oh, you're new to the UK, you're new to the health system, you're new to how we do things here. And honestly, that is not true. I mean, yes, it's true, you are new. There are things that you are going to have to learn, but it's exactly the same in going into any kind of workspace. You have to learn the organizational culture, how they think through things and so forth. When I actually started, I actually realized that I agreed to being underpaid. The work wasn't any different from what I knew and what I had trained in and what I came with from South Africa. The acts, they may call them differently and they may number them differently, but it says exactly the same thing in the Mental Health Care Act, the way in which you approach, you know, someone that needs to be sectioned. So those kind of things were things that I wish I knew, that, you know, just because you're new to the country and the system, it doesn't mean that you need to be underpaid. Because honestly, that extends to actually being undervalued within that space. So just making sure that when you do get a job, you make sure that you within the bracket in which you're supposed to be paid in specifically for that job, because they tend to also not even just pay you on the lower end of the bracket. They actually want to go beneath that bracket that you're supposed to be in and that band you're supposed to be in. So if you're coming in as a psychologist and you qualified, you're supposed to be band 8A, so nothing less than that. That's something that I wish I knew. I wish I knew that your first workplace will likely be the most challenging one for you. And I think a huge part of this has also to do, you are coming into a new space, you have no idea how things work in that kind of space, you have no idea the kind of culture that environment has. And the second job that you actually go into, you tend to enjoy it a lot more because you know exactly what you like and you don't like. You know exactly, you know, what you want and don't want, versus the first job that you get. Honestly, I feel like I was just so excited that I was getting a job in the UK. I was approached by a recruiter and, you know, everything just went so smoothly. And I was just so grateful that I was getting a job that I didn't think about some of the things that I actually thought about when I was going into this new job. So thinking about the salary package, thinking about the kind of culture they have within the organization themselves, thinking about the people that I'm going to be working with, those kind of things felt really important for me, because those are the kind of things that are going to impact how you feel about work, because, you know, that's the space that you need to exist in, and that's the place in which you spend most of your time in. Another thing I wish I knew is that it takes time and patience to actually find, I guess, your footing within the space. Finding the kind of yogurt you like, that's something that's important. Finding the kind of cereals you like, finding the kind of social spaces you feel most at home at, finding the community that you feel most at home at. So those kind of things, they take time, and that it's possible to find them. And before actually going into that space and finding those things, you will experience a depressive episode. Everyone that I've actually spoken to that was from South Africa and moved to the UK and spoke about the experiences here, both within the Oxford community, the Rhodes community, people that I've met in London, people that I knew from back home who have moved to London, there's just this phase where you just have to go through a depressive episode. And I think it's just the realization that actually I didn't think I was signing up for this. Relocating and moving to the UK was supposed to be the most exciting thing in my life, and yet it is so hard. And I think just the awareness of that causes such a deflation in you and such a huge dip that you literally go into a depressive episode. Honestly, for me, I could honestly say that it was the lowest I've ever been, and that was last year. Yeah, last year around this time. It's May now. So between May and July, it was the pits, but it's gotten a lot more better. I experienced the worst of my lowest, but also I've also had moments where I experienced the highest of my highs while being here. And I think that just made me a lot more resilient. It made me a lot more aware of myself, and when I am going into that state of okay, things are not okay, and being able to make sense of why things are not okay, knowing that it's perfectly normal for me to feel this way and I'm not alone in feeling this way. Those are the kind of things that feel quite important, because now I know also how to respond to it. So that's also something that I wish I knew, that it's not all rosy. It's not as easy as you think it will be. It's not like this amazing experience and it's all good and it's you living your best life. So I wish I knew that it gets really hard. It's probably going to be the hardest experience that you have, but if you are able to get through that and you are able to move past that point, then you become okay. Another thing I wish I knew, that doing a PhD, guys, doing a PhD is not easy. I mean, it's the easiest, personally, I feel like this is the easiest and most chilled degree that I've ever done, but it's also a very long commitment, and it comes with its own frustrations. There are moments where you have like highs and you get excited about the work, but there are also moments where you experience lows and a lot of frustration, and you're just like, I can't believe I'm actually going to be doing this for such an extended period of time. So it really is a lot. So making sure that you pick a topic that is actually meaningful to you, and also a topic that will be able to get you through those moments where you're just like, what's the point? So that's also something that's quite important. I wish I knew that. I also wish I knew that it's also quite an isolating process in and of its own, especially if like you're not part of a lab group. Having a PhD community within your department also makes a massive difference in terms of, the level of support you have, having other people who are going through the same process, so you feel a lot less alone when you are having these moments of literally feeling a dip and questioning why you are here. And also when you're just encountering certain challenges in terms of your research, trying to think about like methodological approaches and so forth, having a community is honestly something that's very important. And I guess overall that, it's okay. It's okay to go through the highs and the lows. It's okay for you to question a lot of things. That it's okay for you to be uncertain about something that you had been so certain about, and also that it's okay to give it time, to give yourself enough grace to be able to kind of find your footing here, that it does get better. Like I honestly never thought I would say this, but it does get better. And when it does get better, it's honestly probably one of the best experiences that you'll have. And if it doesn't get better, then it's also okay not to stay, to actually make the decision to go back home, that it's not an L, that it's okay to go back home. You have a home, you have a space that's comfortable for you, you have a sense of community there, you have something that's really grounding for you. And if you're not able to establish that in the UK, then it's also okay to go home. That's something I had to remind myself, that what, it's okay. If it gets to that, then I will. And I also have 2.5 more years, hoping 1.5 more years to make that decision. But yeah, I hope that you guys find this video quite helpful. If you guys have any other questions in terms of living in the UK, relocating, or anything else that comes up for you guys, please put it in the comment section down below, and I will definitely make sure that I do my best to answer it. And if you guys have any other content that you'd like to see on this channel, please do let me know. But I'll catch you guys next time. Mwah.